Good morning and welcome to the continuing series of hearings on the retained bail bills we have. If you would join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance before we begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, I believe we have a presentation this morning. And if you would, please come to the mic and introduce yourself and what we'll be hearing.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm going to have the folks from SAS Institute come up here and introduce themselves. But my name's Jonathan Melanson. I'm with Demers and Praisall. So while they introduce themselves, I'll also be handing out a presentation for you all as well.
If you could just tell us who they are and what they're here for.
Yep. They'll be able to explain more, but they're primarily a data analytics, specializing in data analytics. And they have previously done work in North Carolina doing a criminal justice tracking system, and are here to present and answer any questions you all might have in implementing a similar system here.
Thank you. You get an extra pen. Give me. Bag. Okay. So where's the bag?
Good morning. Good morning. My name is
Good morning.
Minerva De Dios. I'm with SAS Institute. I want to thank you for having us today. I am, as John had mentioned, we are we're actually a company, a software analytics company, and I am the account manager that supports all of our state and local government agencies in New England. So nice to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Corellis. I'm a principal industry consultant with SAS. Happy to be here today. And my role is to help really government agencies across the country on leveraging data and analytics to improve services, outcomes, and really decisions. So happy to be here today. Look forward to the conversation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Jake Yokel. I manage our state and local government practice for the Northeast. My team, what we do is we help departments and states leverage their data for some of their more strategic initiatives and embed different data and analytics strategies into those initiatives. So thank you for the time today. We look forward to this presentation.
All right. I have to say this is my first time talking into a mic, so thank you. So we are, as I had said, we represent SAS Institute, and probably many of you don't know who SAS is. SAS is a company that is headquartered out of North Carolina, Cary specifically, Cary, North Carolina, and I've been working for them for about 7 years. I'm originally from New England, actually, and came from Boston and then moved to North Carolina for various reasons. Our company, I'm going to start from the beginning and say that our company started out as a project in the late 1960s when a number of different universities came together to look at a system, a statistical and software package to be able to look at agriculture data. And that data they wanted to analyze was to identify where they can maximize crop yields. As a result of that, which was funded by the NIH, they developed a system called the Statistical Analysis System, which is SAS. That system analyzes billions and billions of rows of data in many seconds. And it helps change the way we work and the way people live. And since 1976, our founder and CEO today, Dr. Goodnight, developed this system now is all over the world, in many, many different countries. And because of that, we're able to work in faster ways, in ways that we're able to save lives and able to be more efficient. Because of our roots in the education system and in government, SAS is a leader in artificial intelligence and data analytics. And as Jonathan had said earlier, that is where our strengths are, is being able to analyze data from disparate sources in ways that no other software company can really do. And since over the last 5 decades, we've been able to demonstrate that. What we wanted to share with you today is a little bit about what we've done in the state agencies. We're in about 134 countries around the world. We're in about 1,600 different departments and agencies and bureaus in the world. And we're also recognized in many different areas in terms of finance, in healthcare, in pharmaceutical, but again, our foundation's in the state. So we are actually in New Hampshire. We have a number of different agencies that we serve. We serve in hospitals. We serve in the education systems. We also serve in many of the different agencies here. And so I'd like to turn it over to Jake to kind of talk through some of the things that we've done in the Northeast. He oversees many of those agencies that are using SAS. And I think if you look at the presentation deck, we serve 8 different pillars, and I'll turn it over to Jake to kind of describe that.
Thank you, Minerva. So we recognize that agencies and states today have more data than they've ever had. Data that exists in different silos from different systems that we've invested in over the past several years. The data is out there. What SAS does is help those states, those agencies use that data in ways to make better decisions. Our systems help the agencies, help states be able to bring that data together to make those decisions, make those policy decisions, resource allocations that they're trying to do based on what the data is saying, based by what that evidence is pointing towards. Few examples I want to call out from across the Northeast. We do a lot of work in the public safety realm. One of the states that we're working with their fusion center operations, right, to help them contribute data and analyze data from a local perspective, a state perspective, and then also reporting that up to the federal government as well, right? And then in addition to that, we're working with a different state with there's 1,600 troopers that are using our software every day, touching the software every single day, and it's pulled to the software is pulled together all their data from across corrections, from across public safety, and homeland security, right? And that state has actually developed a data sharing network across those agencies as well, which we're supporting. And then in the public health space, again, we recognize that there's also an overlap between public health and public safety, and we are supporting bringing together in a different state different agency data from Department of Health, from public safety, to be able to analyze impacts of different policies, different resource allocations, again, based on what the data is saying today. So the reason we're here today is to talk more specifically about a project in North Carolina that is very relevant to some of the conversations around data sharing as it relates to public safety. And I will turn it over to John to talk more specifically about that.
Thanks, Jake. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. So you guys have in your handouts, and so I feel like I'm going to be a teacher and say, go to the next page, and here's what you're seeing. But I think that's going to be the easiest thing to do. So what I'm going to walk through is a little bit more of my background and why am I here, not just from a SAS perspective, but from a experience perspective. And then walk through kind of what data is in this system, which is really the relevant components of what you probably are looking for. What data have you integrated? How have you surfaced that data? Tell me about the roles and how people use it. Some what I would call screenshots from the system, and then show some of what makes up some of the reports that might be really important, like pretrial service report and those type of things. So I'm going to walk through it. I know it's going to be kind of like an eye chart on these on what you have, but I think it will. I'll walk through and describe it. I think in a way that will all make sense. And then, of course, we're all open to discussions and question, of course, as at the direction of the chair. So again, happy to be here, John Corellis. And again, I described my role as a principal industry consultant, and you know, I came from the state of North Carolina. I spent over 25 years with the state of North Carolina. The last 7 or 8 of those years, I was the deputy state CO and chief data officer. And within that organization, there was something called a really amazing group called the Government Data Analytics Center, or GDAC for short. And as I described, my role at SAS is, you know, integrating data, improving, you know, outcomes, and trying to gain intelligence from the data to improve services. GDAC did the same thing. GDAC worked across an enterprise. 17 agencies in the state were contributing data, which is essentially all the agencies contributing data and receiving some type of analytic benefit back in their operations. It's not data and analytics for analytics' sake. It's to do something with to make a decision, right? So data doesn't help unless you use it. And you use it in a way that's, you know, clear about what you're going to do with it, recognizing privacy, recognizing security is of utmost importance, and then, you know, handle that data responsibly. So the solution I'm going to talk about today, and this gets a little confusing for me because I was a state employee for over 25 years, and I'm on the vendor side. I've been here about 18 months. But this system was under my leadership in North Carolina. So if I get confusing, sometimes I talk about it like I'm still administering the system, and sometimes I talk about it like a vendor. So please put those together and bear with me. But let's talk a little bit about what CJ Leads is. And that stands for the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Automated Data Services. And so this solution really provides a wealth of data in one place to present a single view of an offender, a comprehensive, trusted single view of an offender. And I'm going to go into some of the data components, but that's of utmost importance. But how this system came to be was unfortunately through a lot of really good ideas and solutions come from tragedies in government that we have to address in government. So when you think about, you know, a lot of these solutions, that's how they came to be. So in North Carolina, we had 2 very high profile murders from 2 students at our flagship universities, which are University of North Carolina and Duke University. And these 2 students were murdered by 2 individuals that were known, that were on probation, but because the data wasn't officially connected, you know, you were only seeing a part of the picture when they showed up in court. Should they have been on the streets because there was additional charges while they were on probation, whatnot. Now, I'm not going to say the outcomes would have been different, but there might have been different opportunities to intervene with those outcomes. So so really the legislature and really all of state wanted to understand what we could have done better from a state perspective, from a local perspective, just across the board. And what we really understood was from a data perspective, our criminal justice system, it absolutely was not a system from a data perspective, right? So it was a bunch of silos. You know, the data was all available that was probably needed. It's just, it's in their like siloed organizations. So what came of that was trying to address that problem by developing that single view of an offender, by integrating the data more fully, and also trying to break down those IT barriers, right? And again, it's the data's there, it's sitting in a silo, it's not being leveraged because, you know, and you could access these systems if you go to all of them. And then you're burdening yourself with the time it takes. You need to move on to maybe another search, another problem, those type of things. So it's about efficiencies. So you'll see a slide that kind of highlights CJ Leads. There's some quotes on it. I'm not going to go through the whole slide, but really the purpose was the results really were to increase public safety by having this information, and that's both those that the criminal justice organizations were serving, as well as increasing the safety for the criminal justice professionals. And then also to create those efficiencies, right? So if we could take 10 to 15 minutes off of searching, that's real money. That's general fund appropriations, or that's, local appropriations that, create those efficiencies. So you'll see some metrics where the state's reporting today or last year, 18.6 million just in efficiencies. And that's looking at all the time it takes to what would have taken to go through all those systems, and having a centralized view of that offender, just saves that time as well as increases public safety. So that's where it came to be. Another, how it also came to be, and I mentioned the unfortunately the high profile murders and the all state approach. The legislature also, put GDAC on course to say, to develop a pilot program to actually integrate criminal justice data, get all the partners in the room, provide some funding to get it going, and provide authority to get it going. Because on these type of ventures, there's a couple of things that are always needed: accountability and authority. And those things were granted, and then quick check-ins to check on progress and to remove barriers. As you all can imagine, being the committee you serve on, data sensitive, governance is important, and it's not just about connecting data, it's about connecting people, connecting organizations, and breaking down some of those silos that are both organizational and technical. Okay. So I'm gonna, teaching moment, next slide. Sorry. Jake spoke to this and Minerva spoke to kind of our portfolio.
What number slide are we on?
Oh, I'm on integrated data. It should be slide 6 if we get the same numbers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. So when we talk about integrated data, oh, is it page 7, 6, 6.5? Okay, yeah, that's good. So on the integrated data, I'm not going to go too much into this slide, but as I described kind of what we were doing for criminal justice, I think when you start looking at government problems, those large government problems, they're really complex. And sometimes governments have focused on trying to solve them from one agency's data perspective. And what I would say is the problems are interconnected across state services and those type of things, never more apparent than in criminal justice, right? So the connectivity of those services, are really important, which means the connectivity of the data is really important, because you're really looking at it from a perspective of not just what one service is doing, but what's the collective impact of the services and investment government's making to improve or inform a problem. So when we start talking about criminal justice or any part of our portfolio, a lot of what we focus is on enterprise approaches, enterprise strategies, enterprise delivery, because that's really where those investments are enhanced, because the problems are I'm not going to say solved, but you can come up with a better approach. So I'm going to dive deeper in next slide into the meat of this. And again, I'm just going to cover some surface points from this system. I'm not trying to do a demo. I'm not trying to get too deep. There's a lot more functionality, capability in this system, but I'm going to try and highlight the most important piece, which is the data piece and the accessibility to that data. So I'm going to walk through some screenshots very quickly and just kind of talk a little bit about them. But this slide 7, where it says CJ Leads Integrated Data Summary, is really the best slide in this deck, because it shows what data has been integrated. So you can see the data that's been integrated: courts, warrants, protective orders, corrections, probation, DMV, of course, and other licensure data is included in the system, many, many more. Just looking at this, you probably realize the effort it takes just to get people to contribute their data and be able to receive benefit back from that. So this is really, again, the software, the analytics, that's all wonderful, but the process and the governance and those type of things can't be ignored, because you can't get there without it. So this is, I think, speaks testament to is a testament to all the work that not just GDAC or me leading the organization performed. It's actually the testament of the work of all these agencies to really bite into the same objective, share that values, and want to work together to collectively solve problems. The one thing I should also say is CJ Leads is used by over 25,000 criminal justice professionals today. It's probably closer to 26, 27,000. 700 agencies are participating in this program and leveraging it. So it's a pretty big effort with a lot of buy-in, and it's very mature at this point. And it took a little while to get there, as most things do. Most good things take a while to get there. But again, these are folks using it every day. I'm not going to say to solve problems, to react to some situations, et cetera, et cetera. So slide 8 says CJ leads critical foundational components. And so I'm going to be talking about screenshots and the technology and those type of things a little bit, not very deep. But what I want to address is, technology is critical, but again, I've already said this, but I want to say it again, developing sound processes and practices and support for the system, are also critical, because you'll never get to technology unless you address those. So on the right-hand side, you'll see some boxes: access policy, security authentication, user admin training requirements, system auditing, communication. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those, because those are foundational to anyone trying to do an effort like this. So access policy. So when you think about this is your governance. So from a governance perspective, there's a couple different aspects of this. One is those that contribute data to the system, and that's addressing and identifying all the privacy and CGIS and security concerns that may need to be addressed, and making sure everyone's comfortable in how the data is going to be handled, managed, protected, and who's going to be using it, right? So that's really critical to get out of the blocks. What's also critical is, organizations. Those 700 organizations need to also know what they can do on their side. So that might be a local police department needs to sign a policy and needs to review a policy, and there needs to be conversations to make sure they understand how their officers can use the system, similar with the courts and those type of things. So very well documented processes that are followed, policies that are updated as they need to be, as new data is added, as data's changed, as we see, changes in the world, that privacy policies change, we need to address those. And I know I took a lot of time going through that, but I think we all know those are very important things. The other is security and authentication. And that's, something you do, right? So this isn't necessarily a policy. This is how do you protect that data and making sure everyone's, informed and comfortable with that. But it's also about how you actually access the system. So this system's protected by multi-factor authentication. So, it's 2 factors to be able to log in, to be able to gain access to the data, et cetera. User administration. So this is a state system, but it's deployed to those 700 organizations. The state doesn't know necessarily when a user from a police department comes and goes. So being able to deliver that delegated administrative authority back to the agencies to manage and control their users, and to create super admins that that are part of the system is real important too. Otherwise, it's just a jumbled mess, and making sure practices are in place to do that. The other is training requirements, right? So if you're going to use the system, we want you to know how to use the system, right? And so we have these practices, access policies, those type of things, but how do you put that into practice, right? We're not going to provide data to a certain role that doesn't need to see that data. But at the end of the day, we don't want a court official, someone that's determining bail, those type of things, to not understand how to use that system and miss out on intelligence that would have been important for that next action, right? And then the system auditing. So that's user in system. So especially in this space, we set up from the day one an auditing capability that is every click is audited. So what John Corellis does in the system, who I search, all my activity is auditable. The state also puts back to whoever's identified in the agency. Let's say it's a local police department, the chief of police or a court official, those type of things. We will provide back audit reports on their users, so they can see, hey, is this kind of normal activity compared to other users in my organization? And if not, they can request deeper audits to say, I want to know what this individual has been doing for however period of time to see if they're using the data, the system appropriately. So having those audit capabilities to understand how folks are using it, holding them accountable as well, is absolutely important to that system. And then I have communication, and communication is across the board. But there's a couple of things I want to highlight about communication, which is we have so much data in this system that's updated very frequently. So when you think about some of the data uploads every night or multiple times a day, some of it's real time. And some of that data is warrants, that's real time protective orders, all those things, DMV, images, those type of things. It's real time information so that you can react to. And again, some of it's updated every night. Communicating to the users so they can see when was this data last updated is important. So in their reports, they can see the data I'm looking at it, when was it tagged? It was updated 5 minutes ago, or was it updated, is it real time and it's literally current as of this second? And I say like real time, like warrants. Warrants is real time. Is there a warrant that we need to be aware of? But then it may not hit your criminal history until it loads that night into your criminal history, right? So it uploads once a day, but it's also real time to tell you if there's an issue. So again, it's a really, all these factors, all these things really are have to be addressed before even implementing, a technology solution. The next slide 9, is just, again, I'm not going to cover much here, but here are some of the roles that access this, and each state may call different roles differently. Magistrate may, be setting bail in North Carolina. You might have, I think, bail commissioners, and then you also have judges, depending on the offenses and those type of things, and charges, excuse me, that, that may be looking at this. But what I wanted to clearly show here is that there's roles, and you fit into one of these roles or you don't have access to the system. Okay. And the other thing is, when we start talking about this type of data, really any sensitive data in government, I know the state of North Carolina takes this approach. I know SAS takes this approach, which is minimum data necessary to do your job, right? So we don't want to hold data back from people that, could really use it to do a better job at delivering services back to organizations, but data's risk, right? So if you don't need it, you don't have it. And that's the approach that's taken here. And again, not trying to be stingy, we're just trying to be responsible. Okay. Next slide, which is slide 10. And this is just a kind of a depiction. This is the navigation menu. And I know it's really hard to read, and I'm not going to be going through this because we would be here till Friday, which I'm happy to do, but I don't think that's what you're looking for.
We'll
this
be
is,
happy to, don't feel rushed.
Okay.
We want to make sure we get all the available information that may apply to this.
excellent. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the navigation and the menu, it's really simple. So a couple of things I want to call out. We'll put any type of immediate news that folks need to be aware of. We'll put back on the screen, remember your access policy and whatnot. And then we provide simple navigation. I'm going to transition and go through some of the actual screenshots. But what I want to also highlight is you're looking at what the system would look like, but even the screenshots are from a demo system. Okay, so we have a live demo system that does not have any real data in it. It's all fictitious, right? It's made up just for the purpose of training and the purposes of demonstration. So when you see names, they're not real. I just want to be clear on that. I'm going to highlight kind of how the system would work and how you would also interact with it. But what I really want to get into is show you the comprehensive details of what's in that system as well, at a very high level still. So next slide is slide 11, and I want to kind of not so much tell a story, but discuss how someone might use this system. So if I do a search, and I'm doing a search on John Porter, John Julian Porter, Jay Porter, what it's going to return is, and I'm just searching on an individual's name, there's DMV searches, there's partial name searches, there's, other criteria that you could search on, but the results are the same. It presents back, the system presents back who, based on the information you provided, who is likely the individual you're looking for. And then it will provide some other folks that might be similar so that you can make a determination, do I have that right person? Because you may be staring at this individual and now you see a picture and it's like, it's not number one, it's number two. It does. And it also does things like fuzzy matching, and then Soundex, which is how someone's name sounds and does that entity resolution around that. So there's many factors. I mean, obviously you can search on social security number and those type of things if you have it, but there's many ways into the system. And part of that depends on your role. Part of that depends on, you know, what you're doing. If you're pulling someone over and you have a license plate, that's your way into the system to understand who you're dealing with. But sometimes you may start with an ID. You may start with just them telling who they are. But recognizing at the time of arrest, not trying to be snarky, but we have a lot of Donald Ducks and Santa Claus at the time of arrest, right? So, you know, you want to know kind of those things too, because even at the time of arrest, they may say they're Donald Duck, but they may say they live at 100 Main Street. That might be enough information, you know. It's hard to consistently lie, right? So they may provide a sniff of the right information for you to find out who they are, right? So hopefully that makes sense. The other thing that you're seeing is a bunch of red letters. And that's really important because we put things in red that you need to react to. So in red, you'll see these are warning icons or flags is what we call them. And so AWC, which is approach with caution. That's the most immediate thing you need to see. And I know that's more particular for law enforcement, but still really important. And you'll see other red flags going across John Julian Porter that are also important. And this isn't the nicest individual in North Carolina if it was a real person, because there's a lot of stuff going on here. This person has orders for arrest. They're a sex offender. They're a habitual felon. They have protected orders. They've been involved in community corrections. They're gang affiliated, so on and so on. So again, this is a little bit much, but when you start using this in the real world, you'll see maybe one or two flags that you need to immediately think about, address, and figure out how you're going to respond to. And so that's the most critical thing. So this is kind of that high level view, just determining who someone is, but it's still giving you enough information to react to. Okay, so I want to put that out there. But if you were to click in to view more, and that would be on the next slide. And, you know, this is a comprehensive summary, but it's not a detailed summary. So as you click in, again, what you see is red, right? I know it's a little bit kind of a orangey red, but it's red. Those are the things that you need to think about, address, or basically activity going on with this individual that you need to be aware of. So you'll see a lot of other information on here. You can actually go through things like past addresses and there's watch lists and other capabilities on here. But again, I'm just addressing, I want to talk a little bit about the navigation and how you drill even further in this, you know, getting this detailed information for you to react to and respond to. So in the red, you know, you'll see what's going on. You can see sex offender, you can see they've been in prison and all these different factors. But then you'll see also in the middle of the page that this person has 2 pending court cases. So if we wanted to click, and you can click on the left nav, or you can click right on that to understand what are those 2 pending court cases, because that's really important. So if you click on there, if you go to the next slide, and again, I apologize, it's a little hard to read, but at the very top, you can see those 2 pending cases, the county, and you can see that this is for traffic, these court cases. And there's ability to scroll all the way to the right. There's a ton more information on here. Now, if there was disposed of cases, you'd see all those. I think on the previous page, this is where it's demo, and we try and in training, I know with the state, try and throw some anomalies at folks to understand. Like the previous page said, I think there were 62 disposed cases, but when you come to this page, there's only 2. Well, that's kind of for training purposes. What doesn't add up? So if you see some of those anomalies, that's intentional, okay? But if you want to go a little further, sometimes it's about those details. And if you go to the next slide, sometimes it's, you know, you want to frame what you're looking at. So you're looking at data, you're looking at tables, you're looking at information, but sometimes you want to see things on a timeline. like how clustered were these events, this criminal history? Is this a real recent trend, or was it 20 years ago where a lot of this was? So again, looking at the criminal history on a timeline is very helpful. And if you were to click on the icons on the timeline, you would get more details about that event. You can also, I've got the timeline set up for basically a year over year. You can actually go deeper and look at briefer periods of time. Because that may be important to you as well in determining what your next move is, right? Your next action. So I think having the ability to look both at kind of this very heavy textual type of information is good, but then to be able to see that timeline's also helpful for some instances. And we've heard from our users and testimonials about both have been really helpful. So what I want to just briefly talk about is also some of the reporting. So what I'm not showing is all the different canned reports or I should say predefined reports in the system that users want to interact with. So, I'm showing searches and how you can dive deeper into the various criminal history and those type of things. But sometimes you just want, show me the information. Here's my person I'm looking at, the offender. Now just produce a report so I can actually just, look at it succinctly and I can go through what's important to me. So one example of this that's been really helpful for, our folks that are looking at, bail and those type of things and conditions, et cetera, has been the pretrial report. And so this is a report that, again, certain users can go to. They can run that report. It's audited what they're doing, why they're doing it, and be able to return information and results. And I'm showing this a little bit differently because if I showed you just kind of a report, it doesn't make as much sense in a small form factor like the slide. So what I want to describe is all the information that's contained in that pretrial report for an offender. So this next slide 16 shows pretrial report in the middle. And I want to talk about, and I'm going to show more details on this, but I want to talk about some of what data is being pulled back in to that report. So you have convictions, and that's obviously important, but the violent convictions are called out separately because of how important that is when thinking about if someone should be released while they wait trial. Probation, unserved warrants, orders for arrest, pending cases. And we heard a lot of feedback from our users when this went live that they may be making determinations without recognizing that there's pending cases in other counties. There's even if there are cases in other counties, that they weren't aware that they didn't show up, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So having that information here is important. Failure to appear, of course, I was covering that as well. So this is really what we heard was this was enough information, really good information for a professional to be able to make a really good evidence-based judgment, okay? So if you go to slide 17, this is not the prettiest picture, but I wanted to unpack that previous slide a little bit. And again, with data in here, it actually looks more messy. So what I wanted to do was go through, those same data that's coming into this pretrial report and provide what details of that data come in. So you can see what data is in the convictions and violent convictions. So, I mean, what's important? What's the last violent conviction date, right? So is this something that happened 20 years ago? Is this something that happened 2 years ago or 1 year ago? Because those are the factors and judgment calls that professionals can make when they see that information. Again, the pending cases, you can see things. We have 100 counties in North Carolina. People move, people travel across counties. People thinking about like DWIs. There was one incident where someone had, when the system first went live, they were treating DWI sometimes like it was their first DWI in this county, but there was 2 other DWIs in 2 other counties across the state or even next door where they were awaiting trial and those type of things. So understanding the totality of that individual's or offender's criminal history and what's pending and those type of things, allows them to take that action. The other thing I should say is this is available 24/7. It's set up in a way where, active, where, you could have when something goes down, you have another replicated system come up, so that there's very little lag or downtime in this system because of the criticality of what it and who it serves and what it does. So if you go to the next page, this is a little different spin on this system, or a little different highlight of this system. So, I'm talking a lot about criminal justice and having that information for those professionals, but there's other important information that it surfaces. And one thing that I think is really important that came a little later in this system was we do a lot of work with our juvenile justice department. And we wanted to, and the Juvenile Justice Department in North Carolina wanted this, of course, as well, and same with all the partners in this system. They wanted to be able to address opportunities to identify programs across the state. And so you're seeing a juvenile justice service directory that's built into the system. And what I would say is it provides extensive search capability. Again, it's 100 counties. We have a lot of services that we offer juveniles, but making sure that folks are aware of where to go depending on the problem. So a law enforcement officer could use this system and try and work with the family and identify some services that may be really important to them, whether they're alcohol and drug, mental health, aggression, all these different factors, and they can search regionally to provide that information. Unlike the rest of the system where you're very, very strict on what you can print, how you can print it, who you can provide it to if you do print it, this is one of those that, print it will, share it will, because this is one of those just trying to direct people to the right level of services or in their area and where they live. So this is a nice add-on to the system to provide another different level of service that wasn't what the original system was designed to do. Over the course of time, there's additional features and capabilities, and there's also interactions with other systems such as child welfare, ensuring that if something's happening in this system, that child welfare knows. There's another similar system that we provided that looks like this, that may put, again, a lot of this information can't be shared with a child welfare worker, but what can be shared is a child's at risk based on what we know from this system. Something's happening at a household or with an individual. So some of that information can flow into that system so that, it might be just call your police department, something happened at this address, call your, directing to services basically. So again, there's a lot of what I call extensibility to what we've done by integrating this criminal justice data. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So, CJ Leads, what I'm showing to you is an amazing system, 25,000 users, and people love it. And I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's very operationally focused, right? So when I say operationally focused, that's really what do I need to do right now? Like in this situation, what do I need to do? But as you integrate this criminal justice data, you start to look at the research and the trend and the forecasting to really start to answer different questions, right? And I'm not showing you that side, I'm showing you the kind of operational side. And those questions are, what is happening? Why is it happening? And what will happen, right? What's the best predictor on what may happen, right? So you start to trying to answer different questions, but it's the same data that you integrated. It's just looking at it differently. And then, taking that third kind of lens on once you have the integrated data is, obviously, specifically in y'all's important roles with New Hampshire, is that policy development, which is not just what's happening, how do we intervene, right? What's the impact on our services, and what's the impact, our investments, what's the impact on our investments on the people of New Hampshire? Yep. Yeah, and you might want to include, that's another one of those complex problems, that you'd probably need to look into health data and other data. So I would say it's not just this system, but your use case is along those same lines is what I'm talking about. And so I'm actually done with the formal presentation. So I think I said about 30 minutes, so I was close.
Can you tell me how and if you link, are you linked, the system linked to CGIS? So for example, would a user be able to access a III record through your user interface?
So you're talking about more like the hot files?
Yeah, so the federal level.
Yeah, federal level. So if you go back to that one chart, the answer is yes and sort of, and I'll describe the sort of.
Okay.
It is linked from within that system. We use in our state, which is what links it, our NCIC through, so what we've done is for a certain set of users, you can actually, through CJ Leads, once you're in there, be able to authenticate through to receive information on, I believe it's I think it's module 1 and 2, which are the, stolen vehicles, warrants, and those most important things are what's included in the system. And it's identified on that table, the details of what's contained in that. But
So-
the answer is yes.
So would I be interested to, would an officer on the street, say with a mobile terminal, when he runs an individual, be able to see if he has a warrant from another state?
Absolutely. So so we have, and this is where the sorta comes in. We have it for a certain number of users because that functionality is run through our State Bureau of Investigation, and we've done an integration, for federal wanted and missing persons, state vehicle, stolen vehicles, guns and other articles, and then out-of-state driver's license and vehicle registrations. But it's been deployed to a small subset of the system, but it could be deployed to the larger subset. In North Carolina, you have a cost model to be able to access that. And so that's kind of been the hurdle to be able to deliver it to more folks. So that's where the sort of come in. It's done, people are accessing it, but it's not for a very large set of the users yet.
I think the federal, through the FBI, they're pretty limited on who they will allow access to
Absolutely.
anyway.
And the training as well that comes
Right.
with that, et cetera.
And my next question related to that is that I know by federal law, the courts have to have protective orders entered within minutes. Is the court able to enter protective orders through this system if they were to have it?
So the answer to that's no. And I should have probably said this during the presentation. It's not that they couldn't, but that's not the functionality today. So this system is really not replicating any data. It's only replicating data. So it's not a system of record from like the entry point of the data. There's some data that's created within it, like auditing, logs and user, the user interactions, as well as watch lists and those type of things. But what's interesting about this system, which is probably no different than other states, is you have those source systems that state silo. This sits in the middle of all of them, and then it takes in the information. So like protective orders, as soon as it's entered, that's a real-time service, but it's not entered in CJ Leads.
So in other words, if you are a judge in a court and you issue a protective order, your clerk has to enter it in CJ Leads as well as into the federal system?
So wherever they would enter it into, because they would enter it at the state level as well, and then it would
CJ
go
Leads
to the
captures
federal,
it.
it would then be accessible through CJ Leads. So if there's a protective order that is in the state, so to speak, we'll talk North Carolina, as soon as that is in the system of record, then that actually would then be come up on, if you're searching an offender and there's a protective order, a real-time service would go and check to see if there's anything in that system, and it would surface that flag.
Okay, so they don't have to make duplicate entries. Your system captures what they enter into the already existing system? Am I-
That is, and I'm sorry to be informal, I should
No,
say.
that's
Can I
fine.
answer,
Please, by
Mr.
all
Chair?
means.
But this is, that's a really good point across the whole system. This is not a duplicate effort for agencies. The duplicate effort for agencies is just from thinking about getting data into the system, is really participating and understanding the data, participating in, contributing their data through some type of data file, whatever, method we're going to use. And then potentially, obviously, be a receiver of access to that information or access to the system for looking at a more complete record, not just what they had in their own agency's system, but looking across all the different criminal histories and interactions. So your point is something I should have made, which is you don't enter data typically into this system. The systems exist. So we're already leveraging investments that have been made in those systems. As those systems change and improve, the data still continues to flow into this system.
Okay, so I'm picturing your system as kind of a spider web that connects all these other different things
Yep.
and it captures the information. So if I enter my information in my court system, your system's connected in the background to capture that information.
Yes.
And that's how that gets in there.
Yep,
Like,
absolutely. And so, there's all sorts of business rules, et cetera, like expungements and those type of things. We account for that in the system. But I would look at it more like a kind of a hub and spoke.
yeah.
This is the one system you can go to that captures cross-agency information.
I see.
So the same agencies that are contributing data are also the biggest users of this data because they need to see across the actual now criminal justice data system. Again, that we have to be very plain and say it really didn't exist before this.
Okay. Next question I have is, as far as data analytics, would someone be able to say, I would like to see, and I'm not sure which agency would be the place to go to get data, but if, say, for a university wanted to do a study and say, we would like to see how many people of Lithuanian descent or whatever have been arrested from this period to this period on this charges, and how many went to jail, how many didn't. Are you able to capture that information and generate reports?
I'm going to, that there's the specifics of what you're providing is kind of like, probably depending on how it's asked, is the answer is no, but in general, researchers' ability to gain information from the system. What has happened in the past is agencies have come to trust this hub, GDAC, and as they're contributing their data for CJ Leads, there may be additional uses for their data. That's not for GDAC to determine.
Yeah.
That's for really going back to the agency or going back to that researcher and saying, you're requesting information that involves these two agencies or this one agency. Here's who you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Here's how you need to, how you need to approach them. There may be forms for that agency. What the agency might do, just because we have experience with that data, they may say or have, hey, we had this request come in for our data. You're already getting a feed. Is there any way that you guys are maybe more capable to get back this information to this individual or research institution? What we would then go back to and this really speaks to the data governance, is go back and look at our agreement and make sure that the agreement accounts for that. And if it doesn't, add it and sign that agreement back between the agency to ensure responsibility with that data. And then, yes, we could potentially do that.
For
If-
more specific, let me drill it down a little
Yeah.
more. The counties in New Hampshire are siloed, and some of the court information, you would literally have to drive from court to court to court if you wanted to get a accurate. So if the court system wanted to query its own information to be able to generate some type of report, is that something they could do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so, the difference in the nuances between different states, North Carolina has the Chief Justice that oversees the courts, and
So
then
do
you
we, yeah.
have local courts
Yeah.
that are under that umbrella, for some things, and technology is one of them. So we have one court system that spans all the counties and all the courts, even though they may operate a little differently. So we're connecting into that one system. Now, if you had multiple systems across New Hampshire, which and I apologize for being unaware, then you just have more integrations.
Okay. Okay. Now my last I think I have is regarding users. So we have a bail commissioner system, and we would like our bail commissioners to be able to have real-time access. And a lot of this information was really good that showed open cases. So because oftentimes they may not be aware of a bail from another county that was recently issued. Can we designate certain users to have certain access to certain systems only?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, the role base would allow access to certain systems and really drill down a little further into certain data elements in those systems. And that's where, I'm presenting North Carolina because it seems like a really interesting business case to present, and system
Hauntingly
to present.
familiar.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. But, each state, has its own, policies, rules, and positions on what folks may be able to or may not be able to access. We know a lot of that's federal, but again, it's how it's done in each of the states. And part of it, really is, there's a training aspect. But part of it, if you're doing a new system, you don't want to throw everything at everyone.
Yeah.
So you may want to kind of, it's almost like building blocks. You want it to go quickly, but you want it to go right.
Correct.
So you want to make sure the users understand everything that's happening in the data and the release. And you also don't want to go too fast and assign wrong privileges. And you want to make sure that everyone understands what they can have access to. And so that's diving into also the business cases, right? To document that, this data might be nice to have, but it's not for you right now,
Yeah. Okay.
type deal.
And it's bi-directional so that the bail commissioner would be able to not only see, but enter the bail and the conditions of bail they set, and so that the judge would see that in other police departments and bail.
So that's how it could work.
Okay.
Again, that might be more specific to your bail system, but
Yeah.
the idea of
I
that.
guess my questions are, is it capable of?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. It's just another source system. So it's just another source of data.
Okay.
So again, thinking about North Carolina didn't start with these, 25 different, large data sets. It started with what was the most important in the pilot, right? Those things that we want to integrate as quickly as possible. Don't boil the ocean, and then start layering in additional data.
Yeah.
Twofold. One is, as North Carolina, this group becomes more capable with it, and then the other is, you don't want to try and do too much and create the spider web. You want to be effective, be targeted, do it the right way, and be successful and show value, and then grow from there.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize if you answered this, but I was taking care of getting the heat turned off in here, so you're all welcome. The information that I know that the committee, I speak for everybody, is very interested in, is already out there floating in somewhere land. How does that information get put in here in the first place?
Yeah. So I think there's permission to answer questions. Sorry. Okay. I've been out of government a little while, so I'm my testimony skills are a little lower than they have been.
Some committees are a little stricter. I prefer our back and forth conversational. We get more information that way. So feel free to
Excellent.
answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's twofold. One is, the data governance piece is huge and can't be ignored. And so data governance is really important. And what I would say is data governance is getting all the right people around the table, laying out shared and clear objectives, and be able to have those hard conversations to get to, yes, we're going to share our data. Then there's the technical side of it, right? And that's that data integration piece and, that technology deployment and those type of things. Both of those go hand in hand. But there has to be, people that want to make that happen. And, again, I think, the legislature is probably in a great position to help kind of spur that along. But a lot of this is really soft when it's about just people and organizations working together. There's privacy concerns. There's a whole slew of things that need to be addressed, and folks need to address those. But again, it really comes down to working together, collaborating to the same objectives.
To Representative Rhodes, I think the answer to your question was probably answer to my question, is the information gets in the system when the agency enters it in their system. Their system captures it. Does that answer?
So, if I may, once upon a time, before I decided to be a state legislator, I sold real estate. And one of the things that drove me crazy is that I had to pay and pay and pay. And then I had to belong to the multi-list system. And then along came Realtor.com and Zillow and they all came along, and they took the information that I paid to put into one system, and then they took it and then wanted me to pay for that other system that they took my information from. So I understand the whole spider web thing, but but it has to somehow get in there in the first place. So does it just say, hey, we're going to take it now that we were told, or does somebody have to actually?
Yeah, so working with the agencies from a technical perspective, depending on, there's many methods to bring that data into the system. I think what you're describing is screen scrapes and other types of things. That's not what we would do. We would actually work with the agency that's contributing data to put into the system to have a formalized process of them pushing the data to a certain place, very secure, with the right encryption and those type of things. So no one else can access it unless you're on the other side, have the keys and those type of things. So it might be pushed, or you may go in and grab that data. But again, on the real time, it's a real time connection into that database to pull things like warrants and protective orders and maybe DMV pictures and those type of things, because you want to get that real time. You may not want to wait till once or twice or 3 times a day. So it is a formal movement of data for most of it, and then there's actually then some real time data connections that happen. So sorry for misunderstanding your question. Yep. And there has to be agreements in place and those type of things to ensure that it's secure, et cetera.
So you could have scheduled nightly uploads.
Yep.
And also at the same time, throughout the day, real-time access from the same user.
Yep. And sometimes, this is an interesting space, right? So I mentioned expungements. That's complicated, right? Because it's expunged, you shouldn't see it. So there's some data that comes in, for North Carolina at least, that's a full file reload every single night, because some data may disappear and it's gone for good, right? So there's things like that you have to account for, which are the business processes and the policies, et cetera. And they may be unique to each state that you just need to address.
I have another one in case. So we talked about criminal justice, and the aspect of that is the DMV. So on a timeline, how long would it take to implement a system like this that tied in the court, the law enforcement, and the DMV?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That
Assuming everybody agreed, everybody participated.
So, that's a great question that I would love to answer in more detail, but I would need to understand more about the systems and the architectures and those type of things. But I think what, to me, a logical approach would be is to take kind of a step forward and a step back at the same time, which might be to actually document all that over maybe a period of 3 months, and go hard at that to understand exactly what you're going to do, and then figure out the timeline from there. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Some of that depends on the resources being ready to be able to get the files ready and those type of things at the agencies. And so there's factors in there. And again, I apologize for not answering your question directly, but, I think that, obviously I think it's probably within a year, that's for sure.
Could you, based on your historical with North Carolina, how long did it take them to get at least that aspect? I understand that there are potential for different modules to be added, but
I think what would be, if allowed, what I'd like to do is go back and present some of that information after this
Sure,
committee meeting, if
absolutely,
that's
yeah.
okay. because I can look back and see where do we start first. Again, where we started in North Carolina, this is New Hampshire, it's not North Carolina. I
Sure.
want to recognize that.
Yeah.
And so where they started may be a different starting place for you. What would be nice to understand is to understand what are those, where would you start? What scope? What agencies first?
Yeah.
So identify, prioritize what data is most important. But we can generalize, based on what we know in our past history of delivering this for North Carolina. And
Thank
happy
you.
to get back to you on that.
Thank you. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell us a little bit about the contracting process that you had to go through in North Carolina and other states, and what you think that would look like here in New Hampshire if we were to contract with you?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So from a contracting process, in North Carolina, again, North Carolina contracted with SAS. We had other engagements with SAS to do this work. And it was, annual agreements that continue to get renewed with additional scopes and scope of works and et cetera to continue to enhance, maintain, and build out the system some more. So we'd have to talk about that's North Carolina, but as far as the contracting procedures in New Hampshire, I'm not as familiar with all of the different methods.
Yeah, we have different statutes that would have to, and also we'd have to discuss, I don't even know, we have different branches of government involved that would have to also agree. It would be complex.
Yeah, it's complex. I mean, and again, I mean, where it resides and who signs the contract is probably those first questions. Again, those are details that I'm sorry, I can't address
No.
at a detailed level, but that's a great question.
That's fine. This is all just things bouncing in our heads. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Aside from that, and when the system is implemented, SAS is the one who runs the servers, and have you
Yes.
guys had any problems with glitches while implemented or anything else which
Yeah.
has made implementation a rocky process?
So not the implementation. So, can I answer that two ways? Okay. So one way is that, some of the glitches are at the start, getting those folks around the table, formulating a committee and getting people to make sure that we all agree on what we're trying to do and accomplish. That's probably, I'm not going to say that's a glitch, but that's your first challenge. And that's the most important challenge, right, across the agencies. From glitches in the system, absolutely. I don't know if there's a system I've ever gone to that runs perfectly all the time. I'm happy to provide the uptime and the stats. This system, I'm going to put my state of North Carolina hat on. If the system was going to be down, and it rarely went down, very rarely went down, but if it was going to go down for more than an hour, I was going to be in contact with the governor's office. I never contacted the governor's office. So that's probably a better way to answer that. But I don't want to, I know I've been mentioning this many times around data governance and getting the folks headed in the right direction. But that is, super critical, even to make sure the system accomplishes what it's setting out to do. And a system, when I say the system setting out what it's accomplishing to do, documenting what all the expectations are to make sure the system meets those expectations. And so, I would say that, and this isn't speaking for CJ Lee, just is speaking across all the different systems I've been involved in. When a system comes up, I've seen where that's not what I wanted. And what has happened oftentimes is that those that contribute and participate maybe don't participate enough, right? Here's my data. We'll see you later. And we're going to use the system when it's up. No, here's my data. Let's talk through the data. Let's talk about the quirks in the data. Let's walk through some of the data quality issues we know exist. Let's document those. Let's document why you don't want to use this field and those type of things. So it's imparting knowledge, and it's imparting kind of that shared responsibility on making sure the system's going to do what it's going to do. And I just want to, again, I don't mean to be continuing to harp on it, but it's not just throwing the data over the wall. It's providing the data with participation.
So basically, you get into the system what you get out of it, what you put into
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
it, as far as not just information, but time, effort, and
Yes.
what you want.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Representative Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question has to do with what this committee might want out of some of this data. And so, one of the things that I recall as an example would be we have discussions about ethnicity. And it's for the purposes of understanding whatever ethnicity is out there and how it's gathered by the police in the various places, it ends up in databases. And there are problems with that, like the drop-down menu with it. The way that an officer at a stop has to report data is by a drop-down menu, and they select a limited number of things based upon whether or not they get data from the individual or not. So your system, if it were implemented, would only be able to gather up all the various databases across the state and the counties and stuff like that and pull it into one place and then do your magic on it, and we might be able to get better data, but it would be reliant on how good the systems are for collecting that data and keeping it in a database. Is that correct?
It is absolutely correct. Yes. So it's not the source system of entry. It's the aggregator of all these various systems to bring that in. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Newman, though, to help, because I think I was trying to ask the same question before with my Lithuanian example. I believe that the problem we have now is the courts capture that information better than the police do, but being able to access it, because it's spread out at different courts everywhere, you can't pull a report. So I feel like we would, if we had a system like that, you would be able to go to the court and they would be able to pull their information that's stored there and get what they needed to give to us, versus the police.
Well, wherever the database is,
Yeah.
it's however good the way you can enter the data, then the data is stored somewhere.
Correct.
Once it's just stored in the data system, you can go to the various data systems and get it out, bring it together, and then maybe this committee would perhaps get a report on what had happened for all of the arrests in the state of New Hampshire.
Potentially. And can I respond to that a little bit more?
You would, but my understanding, and you correct me in your response, we wouldn't go to you. We would go to the court and say, get the data that's stored on their system to give us. They're a repository. They don't give out data to outside sources. They give it to the people who put it in. So we would have to ask them for a specific report. But right now, the court has no such ability because of their various silos. With a system like this, the court would have it all in one place, I think. But please.
No, that's exactly right. But I do definitely want to respond. Once we, started living with this system in the state of North Carolina, you started to see data quality issues. And so the users started to see some of those data quality issues as well, because they're seeing it all put together. So I will say that the data quality improved after the system was released, because you could see some inconsistencies. And so the source systems again, some data can never be updated just by statute in North Carolina, I'm sure in all states, but some data can be. And so there was data corrections made on many different things to improve the data collection process. So it's a great point, but again, CJ Leads is kind of that hub, and the source systems are around that hub, and the data flows into the CJ Leads repository, for lack of a better word.
In North Carolina, is corrections also in your using that system?
Yes.
So they track everything from who's there, how long they're there, what the charges are for.
Yes.
Everything. Okay.
Everything. Yep.
That would be.
I shouldn't say everything. I'm not sure if it's
Well,
everything, but yeah,
well,
all
everything
the
they
critical,
want to put in there.
all the critical probation, parole, all that. Yes.
So, okay. So if as a legislature, we mandated corrections to capture certain data and report to us on a yearly basis, they would be easily, as long as they put it in as we told them
Yes.
to, be able to pull it right back up.
Yep. It's another source, and the detail within that source could be brought in. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick follow-up for my research purposes, just to make sure that I got these numbers right. SAS is in 134 countries, servicing 25,000 users and 700 counties. Is that correct? Or 700 agencies?
Oh, so So I'll let you speak to the corporate, but go ahead and I'll speak to CJ.
Oh, and then the one follow-up question I had for that was also what other states, and if it's a comprehensive list, feel free to just send it afterwards. But yeah, I'd like to know what other states SAS is servicing.
Great question, Representative Wheeler. So just to clarify, so we are in 1,600, there are 1,600 departments and bureaus and commissions where we serve for as SAS does. So as an example, right now, I live in Massachusetts, the state of Massachusetts, and we do work with certain agencies there. And I will add that there is some critical work that we've done in relation to the opioid crisis. And so a lot of what you're talking about with the data, very sensitive data that they're dealing with at the moment. So, but the backbone of the analysis that's being done is used by is done through SAS. So as far as numbers are concerned, I mean, those numbers are growing in terms of where we are. But for the most part, 134 different agencies across the world. And then 1,600 and plus or more, give or take, across the different states.
Can I just add to that? So sorry, it's 134 different countries and then government entities within that. And for CJ Leads, so I think some of it was mixed up with the CJ Leads metrics. So I'll say the CJ Leads metrics. We say over 25,000. I think it's 26,000 to 27,000 users. Officers, courts, prosecutors. There's a whole list of, I don't know if it's about 13 different roles. There's 100 counties that in North Carolina that have access to this. There are some federal agencies supporting North Carolina that have access to this. And so it's pretty broad user group from the criminal justice community. It's not just for law enforcement. It is for, a broader view of criminal justice. And then I'm trying to think if there was other metrics that you were looking for. Oh, we're basically in all the states, and it's just different domain areas. So there's a lot of health agencies use SAS, epidemiologists. CJ, not specifically CJ Leads, is not in another state, but we have a lot of investigative case management and other type of, and Jake had mentioned fusion centers and other type of criminal justice data integration activities. But it's not, here's CJ Leads. It's built on the same technology. CJ Leads is one of those branded, it's really branded for North Carolina. But if you look at what's behind CJ Leads, it's our primary SAS tools that are deployed across a variety of industries and specifically government.
So if we were to engage with your company, we could call it whatever we wanted. It didn't have to be CJ Leads.
I would hope you would. And so, when I was the deputy state CIO, I encouraged agencies to brand solutions or enterprise solutions that cut across agencies. It helps gain buy-in. It becomes, it becomes your baby. We're happy, and I think a lot of technology companies are happy to do this. That almost be behind the scenes, be the intelligence behind the scenes that's delivering information. But really, we encourage you to call things what you want that gets buy-in and commitment from your state.
Did you talk about the fusion? I know I understand fusion centers, but could you explain it to the members, please, about the different agencies that are involved in a fusion center?
Yeah, so we are in, I believe, about 16 different fusion centers across the United States right now. And so fusion centers, the primary goal of the fusion centers is to share data between different agencies at a local level, at a state level, and with the federal government. Our software, the same foundational software, right, that CJ Leads is running on the backbone, that, the hub and spoke model, pulling together different systems of record, right? Your CAD, your RMS data, your SAR data, all that data is being aggregated together into a single system and then provided to the different users of that fusion center for the different investigative or intelligence needs that they may have in their given jurisdiction.
And just for clarification, that's usually anti-terrorism type operations, child trafficking, high level stuff. Any further questions from the committee? Representative Pratt.
I see North Carolina has, I have a question for you. North Carolina has a gun registry, and you mentioned the federal government has access to that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
North Carolina seems to have a gun registry.
Yes, we had a pistol purchase permit program that was run by the sheriffs that is set to sunset.
Oh,
There's
good.
not going to be that program anymore. It may have sunsetted or it's sunsetting in January. So there's no, that was a program that basically the sheriffs had issued permits and those type of things, and that's done away with completely.
So the federal government will still have access to the old records, or will the old
So
records?
you're talking about NICS, what we send up to NICS from concealed handguns.
Yes.
Um,
Well, that's not concealed handguns. This is purchasing guns.
I think what the representative is concerned about is we don't want a record of our guns purchased in New Hampshire accessible to the federal government,
and I don't think that would be the case at all.
other than what they already get from
What they
the,
already get, which would be
FFL.
the offenses that disqualify you from having a gun. Yeah, absolutely. So
So just a follow-up question. So a follow-up question is slightly different. So you're collecting, well, you're accessing massive amount of data.
Mhm.
And so who has access to that outside of the justice system, outside of, and I'm thinking basically like a breakdown of, if you want to break down the silos, you're gonna have to assure that insurance companies, real estate companies, corporations, banks, credit card companies wouldn't have any access to any
absolutely
of that.
not.
Not one piece of it.
No, not one piece. And this needs to be transparent. So all of our agreements are very transparent and are also updated frequently or revisited to make sure that everyone's abiding by them, et cetera. But no, this is everything should be transparent and should be understanding what's going on. Even our privacy, our policies, excuse me, I'm with SAS. I keep getting confused where I work, so apologize. But even if you go to CJ Lead's website, you'll see all the information. You'll even see the policies and access agreements that are out there that everyone has to sign. So it's right there and says what you can do and what you can't do with that data.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Have you ever been hacked?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Representative Stone.
Thank you. Just to clarify, obviously, as a vendor, you'd be able to give us a catered version of what we'd want that would not conflict with obviously information or RSAs or state laws that would prohibit certain information levels. So that when you would get the contract as a vendor, you would basically categorize everything in compliance to what we would request as a state, correct?
Absolutely. Your terms and conditions and your laws. I'm presenting North Carolina as a use case. I'm not here to sell this tool for you. This is a good use case that I think represents some of the challenges I've heard with New Hampshire. But whatever we would do for any state, not just New Hampshire, I just want to speak vanilla, we would abide by the laws and statutes of that state, and the contracts would reflect and respect the laws and statutes of that state. And it's not even just that; it might even be just the business processes. That maybe it's the IT processes, it's the IT architectures, and those type of things. Those things would need to be addressed in collaboration between. It really like working with any vendor that you would expect to do business with New Hampshire. We would honor those same type of respect and discussions.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just one more time, I'll reiterate it for the committee. They are using North Carolina because, first of all, that's the only state that I'm aware of that they do this. But also, they have the exact same, during their opening of the presentation, they could have easily been describing New Hampshire with regard to siloed information that's not connected, and our bail commissioner is not able to access information real time. And so as I said, hauntingly familiar. But any company we entered into an agreement with or explored this with would tailor it specifically to our statutes, our regulations, and what we ask them to do. Any further questions? Seeing none, we really appreciate you coming here today to share this with us, and I hope to stay in touch. And I'm going to speak to the different agency heads and see where that leads us.
We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll stay in contact for any further information. And if you want to share further information based on the questions you heard today,
We can.
please send it, and I'll make sure the committee gets it.
Sounds great.
Thank you very
all.
much.
Appreciate you.
With that, we are going to take a break until quarter of, and then we'll be back. At this time, we're going to begin again, and we have several people to speak to us from the counties. I would invite them to come forward, whichever one has to lead soonest. And I do apologize if I had understood the time crunch, I would have let them go first, but I didn't.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is George McGlaris. I'm Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners in Stratford County. I'm also president of all the county commissioners in New Hampshire, and I have served in that capacity as president of all the county commissioners for over 25 years. I'm serving my 19th term on the Board of County Commissioners in Stratford. We've been doing pretrial programming. I'm sorry, this is Carrie Conway that's joined with me. She's our director of our alternative sensing programs in Stratford. We started about 25 years ago doing pretrial diversion as a result of the fact that since I've been county commissioner, I've built 3 county jails. So the programs we put in place were designed to level the playing field, for lack of a better term. We had people sitting in jail on $200 and $300 cash bail that they couldn't pay. You had spent back then sometimes 2 to 3 months. By the time they got before a judge, the judge would just release them based on time served. And that's how the system used to be. Since that time, and we had all kinds of other different types of characteristics that don't exist today. But with the programs we put in place, we're doing pretrial assessment on individuals that are going to be at some point incarcerated or not incarcerated. I just want to give you a quick finance issue. Any one of the programs that Stratford County has started, and we call it our Same Justice Sooner model. That's what we call it, the Same Justice Sooner model. Has anywhere from a 4-to-1 to a 10-to-1 savings, 9-to-1 savings for the property taxpayer. As you know, all county jails are supported by the property tax. Every one of these programs we put in place have that type of cost savings. So I'm going to have Carrie Conway talk a little bit about pretrial assessment, how we do it, how the system works, so that when you're working through all these bills that you folks have, Mr. Chairman, you might want to consider doing this in all counties. Not all counties do this, simply because they don't. There's different philosophies on whether they should be doing it. Some people think that we should just raise the bail and keep them in jail. We have that theory out there. We have some people that say that people shouldn't pay any bail at all. There's a lot of PR going on. People forget the reasons why we have bail. We have bail for specific reasons. The main one is to make sure you show up for court. Now, I can tell you that nationally, there's about a 60% abscondment rate that people don't show to court when they're supposed to. In Stratford County, we have a 9% rate. We're one of the leaders in the country when it comes to not making sure people show up for court. And the reason for that is because of the work that we do, that Carrie does with her staff in doing pretrial assessment. So I'm going to have her talk a little bit about that and then answer any questions you might have.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. Something I really want to focus on is the risk assessment tool that we use in Stratford County. Every day, Monday through Friday, our pretrial officers enter the Department of Corrections and conduct a public safety assessment on people that have been booked into the jail the night prior. We ask them a list of questions, and I brought copies of our assessment that we use. I could pass out after or now. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I'm sorry?
That's every Monday that's done?
We do it Monday through Friday.
Okay.
Every day. And so the public safety assessment, it's important to use a scientifically studied tool when you're asking questions. The tool relies heavily on criminal histories, but also gives us room to add in collateral information. So we focus heavily on people's ties to the community. Are they employed? Their past criminal offenses, have we had them on supervision prior. We make assessments on bail. We send reports to the judges before the defendant appears in court. We send the assessments out to the public defenders and also to the prosecutor. So everyone goes to court prepared with an assessment in front of them. We currently have 375 people out on pretrial supervision in Stratford County. As Commissioner Magalaris mentioned, we have about a 9.2 failure to appear rate. One thing to take into consideration when you're thinking about pretrial programs is there's no one size fits all to monitor someone in the community. We monitor people from second-degree assaults to domestic violence to possession charges to DWIs, you name it. We spend the time interviewing each person and we come up with a case management plan with them. So if we think about pretrial, we're supposed to think the least amount of restrictions. People haven't been found guilty yet. So we have in our toolkit, we have electronic monitoring devices that we can use for GPS. We get that ordered a lot on domestic violence for domestic violence survivors and victims. We have a BART, which is a device that people blow into to test if they're drinking alcohol. We do drug testing. We have curfews. We have telephonic supervision where people that we identify as more low risk on our case loads call in every night to check in at a curfew time. So we really tailor our supervision styles based on the person's assessment. This tool is evidence-based. We attend a conference every year, a national conference, where we talk about the newest things in pretrial supervision, and we try to adapt to that. I didn't know if you had any specific questions for us as to what we do in Stratford. I'm happy to answer. I could give you a lot of information about what we do day to day.
If this is something, it's my understanding, it's regarded highly in the community statewide, that we would contemplate dealing with implementing on a statewide level. I'd like to hear whatever you want to share about implementation of the system, cost of the system, necessary employees to manage it,
Sure.
everything you want to share.
Yeah, all great questions. So the cost of our programs, it's about an 8-to-1 cost savings. It's
Versus
about
incarceration per day.
Correct. Yeah, and I do actually have some other charts to show you that show our costs of programs and incarcerations for the last since 2010. So I'm happy to share that with the committee as well.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that you want to do when you talk about pretrial assessment is that you have to have the other side of the stool here, which is the active use of drug court, mental health court. We have for lack of a better term, a deadbeat dad program. We used to have people that would spend time in jail because they wouldn't pay their child support, as an example. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense because while they're in jail, they lose their job. So we have a program that does that. So we have a number of different programs that are all designed to provide alternative sentencing, but also arrive at the same result, the same justice, just sooner. So with that in mind, what would happen is, in order for all counties to do this, like for instance, it doesn't make a lot of sense for COAS. They probably got 9 prisoners in jail. The last time I worked with the COAS County Commissioners several years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I really didn't understand why they were running a jail. I thought they ought to contract with the state and use the state prison in Berlin. But with that said, not all counties are the same. Not all counties have services available to them to be able to do some of the things that Stratford does. Certainly the larger counties could do it. The smaller counties we might have to be a little flexible as to how they would go about doing alternative sentencing. When you really get right down to it, that's what the bail system, the incarceration system, the 2-tiered system of corrections we have in New Hampshire. It's an old system, no question about it. Okay, it's an old system, but we're watching right now over 500 people in the community. We have 80 sentenced prisoners in our jail this morning, 80 sentenced, with over 500 that we're watching in the community. If we didn't have the alternative sentencing program, at least 40, 45, maybe up to 50% of those people would be in the county jail. Now, when that occurs, you take on the responsibility for a lot of costs, healthcare specifically, okay? The healthcare costs, and I don't have to tell you the cost of healthcare. It's dramatic, and it's gone up 100-fold in 25 years. So there are other things that go on in people's lives when we do this assessment tool. We talk about whether they're employed, what they have going on in their lives, what's going on specifically with them. And that's a model that's been, we've actually been recognized nationally as a leader in the area of alternative sentencing. We've had a tremendous track record, knock on wood, so far. And we've been doing it for many, many years now. So a lot of the counties in the beginning will have to crawl before they could run. And there's an expense involved in that. And a lot of places don't particularly believe in alternative sentencing program. A lot of people think you should just lock them up and throw away the key. Well, we locked them up and threw away the key in Stratford County for many, many years. That's what I told you earlier. I built 3 county jails, and I had national consultants come in and tell me what size jail we should build, and we would build it, and 3 years later it would be overcrowded. The third time around, we decided to try to do business a little differently and look at the actual demographics of who we had in jail and the reasons why they were there. And when you look at that and you assess that, okay, it changes your attitude about why we incarcerate people and the reasons for it. We like to incarcerate people because we're mad at them. We're mad at the things that they've done in the community. Well, when I first went around and talked to Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce in my county, we have 3 cities in Stratford County. When I first talked about trying to change the criminal justice system, the way we did business, I used to tell them, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us watching somebody, having them keep their job, okay, and pay you restitution? Or would you rather me put them in jail for 60 days? Which would you prefer? Because when people commit, most of these crimes are being committed, those folks with drug addiction or alcoholism, 70% of the crimes that they commit are property crimes. So when they break into your house and they steal your TV or they steal your computer, or whatever they're going to take, your jewelry, not only is that person, they contact their insurance company, they have a $500 or $1,000 deductible that they're going to have to pay, okay? They want some form of restitution. Well, the person can't pay restitution if they're sitting in jail. So there are instances where it makes sense to use them, monitor them in the community in some instances. Now, we have jails for reasons. Some people belong in jail. Okay, we have them for reasons. But the history that we've been able to develop in Stratford County over the period of time have taught us a few lessons. Number one, that people, when I talked to those people at Rotary and Chamber of Commerce, they said, give me my restitution. I don't care about the 60 days. I want my restitution. So we're able to do those types of things over time that affect society greatly. Now, Stratford County only has 130,000 people in it. 132,000 people. Half of them are children. So let's just take the adult population. We're talking about 70 to 74,000 people. We have 500 people we're watching right now. When I was first elected county commissioner 40 years ago, we had 16 prisoners. We had a part-time county attorney that was prosecuting crime. The grand jury met once a year. We've had a lot of changes in society since then. But we've also learned a lot of lessons from that. And one of them is to do pretrial assessments and do alternative sentencing. It works. It doesn't only work in our county, but it works across the country. Those areas of the country that have embraced that type of sentencing. And it works, but you have to do the assessments and you have to do best practices. So my suggestion to the committee was, if you really want to look at this, is to pay the counties, because most counties don't want to raise property taxes, historically, they have not wanted to raise property taxes to help the folks who commit crime. However, if they do it the right way, we've demonstrated that it saves money. It saves a lot of money, but you have to do it a certain way. And it would be in the counties, it would be in the state's interest to have the counties do this. And the reason why, let me tell you why, is that you want an independent opinion when you do these assessments. You don't want the judicial branch to run it. You don't want prosecutors running it. You don't want public defender program running it. You want an independent assessment done on folks. So when that assessment goes before a judge, it's another tool that the judge can use to determine how they want to handle that individual case. That's what it really boils down to, is giving judges alternatives. Years ago, judges didn't have alternatives. They either let you go or they raised your bail. And as a result of that, a lot of people who couldn't afford to pay, actually their bail sometimes was more than their actual sentenced fine in many instances, because they had to go through a trial. So those are just some of the things that I would suggest, that if you want to look at it, and we can spend some more time with you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to take any more time with the committee. Well, we would certainly like to answer any questions you may have. But it seems to me that if we made money, some form of cash available to the counties, and have them work with the National Association of Counties and those counties across the country that have been successful at doing this, you'd have a different result for New Hampshire. So with that, we'll answer any questions you may have.
When you envision giving money to the counties, since this program, if implemented properly, would result in cost savings, I think of perhaps seed money to start their programs, and then the program should be almost self-funding versus the cost is
Right.
savings.
Depending on the nature of the size of the, like for instance, COAS would have difficulty doing because they don't
About
have a lot-
Rockingham.
Yeah. Well, Rockingham certainly could do it. Expand. They have a great MAT program in Rockingham. The larger counties, if they had the seed money and there was a philosophical change in how we approach the incarcerated, yes, you're right, that they would eventually start to save money. A lot of these facilities, though, were built. A lot of old county jails were built. You have a standard. You have overhead. You have staffing. A lot of them were built under the old way of doing business, for lack of a better term. We've been fortunate in Stratford County when we built our new jail, the latest jail. We built it with a maximum flexibility, so we're able to shut down certain sections of it if we don't need it. We were successful in negotiating federal contracts with the federal government, with the ICE, with the U.S. Customs and Enforcement, and with the U.S. Federal Marshal Service. So we rent out our jail space to the feds, which gives us revenue, which also helps to offset the cost of some of these things. A lot of those counties aren't going to be able to do that because their physical plant's not capable of doing it. So they would need that. They would need that money, that seed money. And you would have to look at it again over a course of time to see how successful they were being or not.
And I know this is probably an impossible question to ask, but what kind of money are we talking about to implement or to start a program, a pilot, if you will, for lack of a better term?
What I'll do is I'll look at that and ship you those kind of cost estimates to you in the committee at some point. It would be different in every county, again, depending on the nature of how broad their alternative sentencing programs would be, and whether it makes sense. In some instances, like for instance in COAS, it probably would make little or no sense for many of those things. If last time I looked at COAS, I'm not trying to pick on COAS, but it's the smallest county we have, and they've only got probably somewhere between 9 and 16 prisoners at any one time in their county jail. And I think you would find that most of them are there for drug-related offenses. If they're there for recreational use, that would be one set of circumstances. If they're there for dealing, that's another. So if you had a robust small part-time drug court in Coas that was up and running, you may not need the jail at all. However, one of the things that's interesting about Coas, and you'll find this in the smaller counties as well, is that the county is an employment base for their people. If they were to shut the jail down, they would lay off, 30, 40, 50 people, and that's a huge employment base for that region. So they don't want it. They don't want the reform. So those are the kinds of questions you're going to run into in the smaller counties. But there's no question in the larger counties, there would be a long-term cost savings. Smaller counties, we'd have to work on it a little bit.
Well, I would envision a piece at a time. For
Right.
example, I like the concept, and I think the committee shares this, of electronic monitoring versus incarceration, where someone could still go to work, but you know what they're doing at all times of the day and where they are. The cost associated with that, we've heard, depends on if you're running it yourselves, it costs less than if you contract with a
Right.
company.
Right.
Are you able to recoup any of the money from the defendant since they are working?
Yep.
Those type of things. So I would be interested to see what components make up your pretrial system
Okay.
that could be used even in a small county like Coas. They may be able to empty half the jail if they could put them on an ankle monitor and
Absolutely.
a program of monitoring.
No question about that. And I'll get that. And we'll make sure we forward that to you.
Okay. Also, what is your interaction with probation and parole? How do you interact with them?
Well, we got it, Carrie. You can answer that. I mean, probation and parole in Stratford County is in our building.
Oh.
So
Which is nice. Yeah, it's across the hall.
right across the hall.
Yeah. So, fortunately and unfortunately, we do get a lot of the people that we set up on pretrial. We have them for X amount of days. We get them sober. They have a job. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They get sentenced, and then they get sentenced to state probation parole. And for us, one of the success and functions of pretrial is we keep our caseload small for a reason, because studies will show you that you're supposed to do that. That's how you work more effectively with people. So we have caseloads of about 50 people per staff. Probation parole, their numbers up around 150, 200, 250. So we often will see that we get someone set up on pretrial and they're abiding members of the society again, and then they unfortunately fall apart pretty quickly when they're getting minimal supervision and minimal interactions due to staffing issues at probation parole through the state. But we do get co-supervised people. There's people that we get on new charges that are already on probation and parole, and we have a great working relationship with them.
It would be helpful to the committee if you could explain, because New Hampshire is cobbled together with old laws and new laws and systems, how someone ends up under the jurisdiction of your pretrial system. Could they be ordered there from a state judge based on a state charge, and the county versus state, and the state orders you to do something with somebody, incarcerate them? Do they give you money to pay for that? How does that, explain to the committee how that works?
So someone's arrested, brought to our jail. In our county, the bail commissioners will often recommend someone PR bail with community corrections. So if they're arrested on a Sunday, they'll say, PR bail, show up at community corrections tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We also get people ordered straight from court. We have people come down that the judge said, I'm on supervision with you now, I'm here. We get people who are out on probation parole violations that we're monitoring on new charges. So we see all walks of life.
And what, if any, reimbursement from the state does the county get for any of that service that is ordered by the state judge?
We don't get any reimbursement.
Any other questions from the Representative Newman? Hold on, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I think I just want to make sure I understood what you just said. For people that are on personal recognizance bail, you get to see them sometimes, all the time, not, or how does it, or is it just incarcerated people?
So some people will get PR bail, and some people will get PR bail posted with us, with community corrections. The people that are straight PR, we don't see.
Thank you.
Representative Stone.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. you sparked on something that I thought about. If you have somebody that's on probation or parole and they're charged with a subsequent offense, which is a new charge, why would you want to absorb the cost of monitoring them on a pretrial when the probation department has much more authority and a mechanism to deal with them? And basically they have the resources as well. Why would you want to basically double dip?
Well, the judge orders them to us. So if it's a new charge, they're not being if they're on probation, they're not being sent back to jail or prison on a new charge. It's a new charge, so they have to, it's either they sit in jail or they come out into the community and we monitor them.
Just follow up on that. Typically with probation violations and parole violations, there's a triggering mechanism for a type of hearing to go forward if they are charged with that. Again, I just don't understand why you'd want to absorb the costs if it's the same type of supervision that would be handled by the state.
No.
We don't like to absorb the cost. Until we had a new statute, the counties pushed for a new statute. What would happen if somebody, for instance, violated a state parole? Let me give you a quick example. This one I always talk about because it's the truth, and it happened. We had somebody out on state parole who was required not to do any drugs or alcohol. Went to their brother's birthday party and had a beer. Probation officer found out that he had a beer and had him arrested, and they put him in the county jail. He sat in the county jail for 60 days because he had a beer at his brother's birthday party. Now, we changed it. We got the laws changed since then. Now you have to have a hearing within 72 hours, so they wouldn't sit in county jail for a very long period of time. But depending on the nature of what the violation is, like for instance, the beer at the brother's birthday party, a judge in that case would just turn around and say, okay, well, we'll put him on community corrections, because you shouldn't have had the beer, instead of putting him back in state prison, as a quick example. Now, should the county absorb that cost? Probably not. However, that's our system in New Hampshire. It's been that way for a very, very long time, that two-tiered system of corrections that we have. In the past, when we've tried to legislate reimbursement from the state, it was always found inexpedient. The state didn't want to pay for it. And so they said, their argument then was, well, we are paying for it. We're using the property tax to pay for it. And that's our policy. And that's what would happen. That's what happened in past years when we tried to get reimbursed for time spent by state probation violators in county jails.
Thank you.
So we're absorbing the cost either way. Either they sit in jail at, $90 a day, or they come out on supervision with us at $7.62 a day.
Thank you. And just so it hurts my brain. The state judge orders somebody who's on probation for a state charge where, for example, they may have a suspended sentence in state prison. The probation officer violates them. Pending the hearing, which now is up to 72 hours, they're sitting on the county's dime. After the hearing, the judge may say, oh, I'm not going to invoke the suspended sentence. Since Stratford County has such a great pretrial program, I'm going to sentence you to community supervision for whatever, 60, 90 days. I don't know how long they would send them for. And once again, that's on the county's dime. Is that a correct statement? Yeah, thank you.
However, I can add one other point. Those people who are incarcerated in county jail spend up to 1 year in most cases, in 99% of the cases. Some will get released within 8 months for good behavior. Now, have in the past monitored people post-trial, post-conviction. So, for instance, they've been good in jail, but we're not quite sure. They've got a settled home life. We don't want them reoffending, so we'll monitor them for a period of time when they're released. So that's the flip side of the argument in terms of we don't want them coming back, because most of the time when they reoffend, they'll be in the county jail system again. So it's cheaper for us to monitor them post-conviction in some cases. So that's another thing you got to be thinking about as well.
So if, again, we're talking about state time. if someone gets out off of a state bid early because of good behavior, and they've got 4 months left, that could be re-invoked or sent back, during those 4 months, the county will monitor them to make sure that they don't end up back in the county system, because that's where the next charge will start.
Right.
Is
If,
that?
if there's a new charge, if it's an old charge, they'll sit with us until they have a hearing, and then most likely they would go back to state prison. But there has been some cases. I mean, we've had cross-county issues. Rockingham has sent us a bunch of folks because they didn't have, the judge wanted them to have the type of programming that Stratford had, and so we would take them because Rockingham didn't provide it, that particular type of programming that the judge was looking for that particular individual. So that has happened in the past. And we voluntarily have done it because we like.
You don't have an agreement with the county, between
Yeah,
counties?
we have just a, gentleman's agreement that we would do it. And sometimes they'll take somebody that we have that might be some trouble for us. Doesn't happen too often, but we have that reciprocity between counties where we would move prisoners back and forth.
I guess that's between y'all.
Right, right.
But what I'm interested in is the state-county interaction,
Yeah.
and especially if we're talking or contemplating expanding these type of programs statewide, if it's already costing the county based on what state judges are ordering, how much more will that cost? So that's good. That should figure into the numbers that we're thinking about. Any further questions from the committee? Oh, Representative Stone.
Thank you. One of the questions I have is, under a straight up pretrial bail supervision situation, what are the realistic timeframes in your experience does it take from you detecting a violation or breach of bail conditions to filing paperwork with the court to actually get that individual before a judge for a hearing?
So in Stratford County, that can happen in a matter of days. We could get someone in front of the judge in a matter of days. We have an agreement with our judge that, and with our court system, that they can get that handled fairly quickly. Commissioner McGlaris mentioned earlier, our judges love having the tools that they have in Stratford County. They don't want to be up on that bench sending everyone to jail or prison. They want options. And so when we provide them with options, they're just so grateful to be sitting in the counties that have these programs. If I could encourage one thing, and if you're moving forward and thinking about this, I would almost think about the money piece as almost like an RFP, a set of standard conditions that these programs need to meet in order to get the funding. Because there are a lot of people that try to run pretrial programs willy-nilly, and they're not doing anything standardized or evidence-based practice or scientifically studied, and they're making bail decisions, presenting them to judges based on their own feelings or like a couple of questions on a piece of paper. So I really think, there needs to be some sort of accountability into that piece.
Thank you.
If I could, just a couple more questions regarding bail specifically. So if you could, does your program offer the bail commissioners more options when they are faced with somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning to make a decision on whether or not that person, who may not probably should walk free just with nobody looking after them, versus that, or just ordering incarceration or them be held?
Absolutely. We definitely get referrals from the bail commissioners. Someone 3 o'clock in the morning that been arrested and they have a job and they're saying that they have to be at that job in order to, to pay for their child's care or to keep a mortgage or something like that. We get referrals from bail commissioners for those types of situations all the time.
And so part of the bail commissioner will set conditions of bail. And is it specific, or do they just say report to pretrial and based on your intake, you'll decide what it is they need? Or do they say monitor or stay away from the victim and you monitor them? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yep. They'll depending on the case, they will set specific conditions, no contact order, report by, have a curfew, drug testing, electronic monitoring equipment. A lot of that is changed once someone gets in front of a judge. But they definitely use those tools, and we're putting equipment on people every day and taking equipment off people every day based on what the judge is recommending.
And your relationship with your county bail commissioners, they all are aware of the services you provide
They are.
versus other bail commissioners have in other counties may not have these resources to use.
Yeah, we've had meetings with through members of the AOC. They've come down and we've had bail commissioner meetings and luncheons and brown bags to talk about the resources that are available. One of the other things that Commissioner McGlaris brought up is very important is the infrastructure. A lot of counties will say, we're going to start a drug court, we're going to start a pretrial program, but there's no infrastructure to backfill. So for someone to be on a GPS bracelet, let's say it's $5.88 a day. Well, we have a sliding scale fee scale that we work from, but we know that not everyone can pay $5.88 a day to be on equipment. So we have a work program where people can show up every day, work a job. This year, it's time of year, it's cutting wood. So they'll work in the wood yard and cut firewood that we then sell to make money in the community, and then that pays for their equipment. So to think ahead about the infrastructure and, if the judge is going to order someone to be held pending a mental health evaluation, does that jail have someone that's going to be completing that mental health evaluation? Because that person's going to sit until they get that evaluation, then they come out on community corrections. Or someone violates and the judge says, well, this is your second chance. You're going to sit now until you go inpatient. Well, you better have connections and collaborations in the community with treatment facilities to get people into programs quickly, or it's really just not going to work.
Which raises another question. So when someone comes in as part of your assessment, you kind of look at their whole state of play. Do they have Medicare? Are they eligible for Medicare? Do you help them get signed up for that? Do they have a driver's license or identification? If they don't, do you get them that? Do you get them the things they need to be able to continue being successful until they're either finished with their case or wrapped up?
Absolutely. No, it's a very good point. Usually after the second meeting, everyone's got a Medicaid identification number that when they're released, their Medicaid is active. We help people with job searches. We give people rides to job interviews. We help people obtain their non-driver's ID. Most people don't have their social security cards, things that we take for granted. We help them with money management, opening a checking account, like the basic things that some of us take for granted every day. Those are things that we're doing in our case management sessions with them.
Do you have a significant number of unhoused individuals that you deal with, and do you help people with housing who don't have it? How do you deal with that?
That's a good question. We do. We have a transitional housing program in Stratford County that we triage county people first. So if someone's in jail because first of all, we're not keeping someone in jail because they don't have housing anymore. That's changed. So they have a tent site. You can come in and charge your equipment when you are, we'll give you bus tickets to come in and charge your equipment. But we also have transitional housing where if they really need a residence and they want to come and live at housing, they can live at our housing for free for up to 90 days. And then the expectation is that you're going to have a job and you're going to pay a third of that income to us to live there. And you're going to be drug tested and you have a curfew and you're going to participate in reentry planning and the whole 9 yards.
So that's kind of like a halfway house type of thing where they're still supervised, but they have a place to live, and they can leave if they choose to. But
Correct.
Okay. And even all these services you provide, you're still seeing a cost savings
Oh, yes.
versus per day incarceration. And I assume in figuring into that, you're talking about the cost of corrections officers and feeding and medical care and all these.
Buildings.
Yeah.
One other quick point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is that under the old system, which is kind of what we've got remnants of the old system here. Before we did pretrial assessment, when a bail bondsman would come in, or when they would come in, they would ask the officer, what do you know about this person? The police officer arrests somebody, they run a IMC report or an NCIC background check, and sometimes there'd be nothing in the system. So then the bail bondsman, he makes a judgment based on what he's heard from the police officer.
You mean the bail commissioner?
Bail commissioners, right? I call them. We used to have bail bondsmen, we got rid of them. But the assessment tool is important because it gives the judge an idea what's going on with this person's life. The old system, the judge would just sit there and say, okay, it's $500 or it's $1,000 or it's $250. And he was just making a guesstimate as to what the person was able to pay or not pay based on what he heard that morning without any other assessment. You don't know whether the person's mentally ill. You don't know any of these things, whether they're drug addict. You don't know any of those things. So with the pretrial assessment tool, this is why the judges like it so much, because we're an independent authority that's looking at these people and making specific recommendations to the judges as to how they ought to be treated as we move through the process of adjudication. And that's an important thing that the judges need, because the old system, it's just not a great system. And it basically discriminated against the poor, for lack of a better term. It is what it is. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but it did. It discriminated against poor folks who didn't have the $300 or $400 or $500, and they would just sit in jail. Like I told you, they'd sit in jail sometimes for 60, 90 days before they'd have the hearing. The judge would come in and he'd say, okay, time served, see you later, goodbye. And that happened all the time in the old system, and probably still does happen in some of the other areas that don't have other resources available.
And all that's at the expense of the county taxpayer.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. So,
Thank you.
I know that you're not. Do you have a question or a comment? Turn on your microphone and speak only to your what you know in your county where you are.
In my county, in my jurisdiction where I
Yes.
see it, you're talking about this old system that just doesn't exist. If someone is held, the judge sees them next day. They're still held. That's just not the way. There's no 60, 90 days. That just doesn't exist in Rockingham County.
Yeah, but
The question I have is this. I'm looking at this pretrial assessment, and I want to know the profile of the person that you're going to be involved with. As a bail commissioner, after I judge flight risk and danger to society, do I have the right to ask them these questions? Who is it? Is this voluntary? Is this for people who are misusing drugs? This isn't for my ordinary bail. I'm going to ask him what his health insurance is. He can tell me.
Commissioner questions. These are for pretrial services.
Is this optional?
100%.
Services, is it?
100%. It's optional.
Oh,
Yeah, people turn down these assessments all the time.
in that case, wonderful. And if I may throw in the comment, I really was appreciative of your post-trial monitoring, not because it saves money. Why? I understand money's important, but it sounds like it's the right thing to do. That's my focus. Of course, things cost. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, if someone's ordered for pretrial services and they refuse to take this, you just tell the judge they refused.
Correct, because the judge will say, "Where's the report?"
Thank you. Representative Newman?
I just have a quick question about the services that you said, bus things and people taking them to committees, to appointments and stuff like that. Are those people volunteers? Are they employees that do that? Are they part of this whole pretrial?
They are employees.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Harriet Gathright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several years ago, right before COVID, I think Nashua was looking into doing something similar to this. I was in a meeting with Judge Coburn, and I think you were there because you look very familiar, and you talked about what was happening in Stratford County. Do you know if we ever implemented anything in Nashua?
I know that they have some sort of a program, but I don't know that a lot came out of that specific meeting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know we have mental health and drug courts,
courts,
but
yep.
this particular program we were looking at too back then. Thank you.
Like I said, I think the committee would really like to see all the components that are part of your services and what you offer and provide.
One last question.
Oh, and Representative Gaffer has a follow-up.
Sorry. So do you have like data how successful this is still out there with your program?
So our failure to appear rate is 9.2% in 2022.
Thank you.
Have you done any research to see how you bump up against the other counties?
In the state, no.
No. I'd like to see what that is. Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you so much for sharing. And I would definitely like more information. I'd like to talk to you about how this could work out.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Karen's going to print them off.
Just for the benefit of the committee, Representative Rhodes wants to say something.
So committee members, I just want you to know that Cheshire County, where I represent, obviously does have pre-trial programs. We have several of them. And I did just get a copy of the pages of the expenses for the pre-trial programs, and Karen is going to print that off so we can all have a look at that. And I'm also trying to get somebody from the county to come testify tomorrow, but you guys are going to see on top of the program, most of the expense is hiring the person to do it, because you're paying state retirement, you're paying everything that goes in along with that. But there are grants that our county has to also help offset some of these. So as soon as Karen prints them off, a lot of the questions you guys have asked will be in this for you.
Have they done a cost analysis versus incarceration? If there's a savings in Cheshire County?
I'm certain that they have, but I don't have the answer to it right now, but I can find out for you. It comes up during budget discussions.
And now we will hear from one more person from is this Merrimack County, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It's okay, I'll pass it up.
Yes, please do.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. My name is Kara Wyman. I'm the Human Services Director for Merrimack County. I started my career 26 years ago working in the court system and as a bail commissioner. And then I moved on to the Department of Corrections and served there for 20 years, leaving there as the assistant superintendent. And today I am the Human Services Director, which brings me to why I'm here, which is pretrial services and adult diversion, juvenile diversion, navigation programs, and all the programs that are outlined in the packet that you just received from us. With me here is Benjamin Forge. He is our program manager, and he supervises the grouping of individuals who supervise pretrial services and adult diversion teams. So, as you can imagine, Merrimack County is different than Stratford County and different than Rockingham County and different than Cheshire and every other county. Just all the counties are just different. So we run things the way that we believe works for Merrimack County. We also work closely with our judges and our public defender's office and our prosecutor's office. Some of the changes that we made when I came on to pretrial services 2 years ago was removing pretrial services out from under the supervision of the county attorney's office. Prior to 2021 in April, the prosecutor's office supervised and drove the mindset of pretrial services and adult diversion. And it was my assessment and my opinion, along with the county administrator, we spoke to the board, and we are now a separate entity. It provides us with some neutrality, and we are able to supervise at an arm's length. We're not then seen as anyone's rubber stamp, and that was important for us. Also, our pretrial officers are not deputies. They were deputized for a time. They are no longer deputized. They do not have the power of arrest. They work as a certified correctional officer. They go through the Association of Counties Correctional Academy, so they can detain individuals that are breach of their bail. As Stratford County does, we interview 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I have an officer right now, it's program manager Forge, goes into the jail every morning. On average, we're interviewing about 37 people a month. We go in, Tuesday it was 11 people that he interviewed. Today it was 1. So it varies based upon what's happening, but that is directly related to who is brought into the correctional facility. If they get PR bailed for an arraignment date at a later time, then sometimes we have a walk-in from the courts. We have 160 or 159 individuals that we've got supervision of this morning. That is approximately 70% of them are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And that 1/3 is 30% is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. The way that the system works in Merrimack County is we report to prosecution and defense that someone is in violation of their bail. And that is where our arm ends. It's up to the prosecutor to file a violation with the court. But the judge doesn't see a violation of bail unless the prosecutor chooses to file that. We do have electronic monitoring. We do have alcohol monitoring. Stratford called it BART. We've changed to a different system. We've partnered with our correctional facility so that we can piggyback on the services, which is they are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we are not. So the jail and pretrial utilize the exact same monitoring system, and they monitor the monitoring system for us. If there's a problem, they call one of the individuals that's on call through pretrial, and then we reach out to the client. We also use an evidence-based validated risk assessment system. What the system we use is called ORAS. It's the Ohio Risk Assessment System. It is we calculate, we gather information from an individual when we interview them to decide we're deciding what their risk is, right, to society. And we're working to mitigate risk by identifying their needs and addressing their needs while they're out there. So if they need food resources, if they need a job, if they're struggling with substance misuse, if they're struggling with mental health, my staff is working to connect them with all of those programs. Now, if it's a little bit more than just accountability and holding somebody accountable, then we retain the accountability portion of the case, but we transfer they need help with Medicaid paperwork or whatever. We transfer that to our navigator program. All of our navigators, all of our pretrial officers, all of our diversion, we're all on the same team. So we'll sometimes simultaneously open separate cases.
Have you also realized the same cost benefit versus incarceration in your county that Stratford did?
Certainly. In my capacity as the assistant superintendent, I know that at least 2 years ago, the numbers were around $200 a day for an incarcerated individual in Merrimack County. It's around $10 a day to have somebody being supervised by pretrial services, because they're a free citizen. They're out in the community, and our hope is that they're being a productive member of society. They've got a job, and we're pushing on them to get that. So they're contributing to society. So it's a cost savings in many ways. Medical is the #1 cost savings.
And as I asked them, and I think you just touched on it, you make sure that they're coordinated with if they're entitled to Medicare, that they get signed up for it, those type of things.
All of those things, yes, sir. We even have a closet in our basement of our building that's got shirts and ties. So if you come to court and the judge says, get out, go stay, it happened to us a couple weeks ago, go see Miss Wyman, you need a tie for court. We dress them nicely and send them back to the courthouse prepared for court. So we're trying to, again, we're trying to mitigate risk by addressing need.
Mm-hmm. And what about helping them obtain employment? What do you do there?
Absolutely. The staff will, when they have the opportunity to do that. If it becomes a case where the person's a little bit more difficult, they need more resources, they need more time spent with them, we will ask one of our county navigators to spend some time with them to help them garner employment. Oftentimes it's because they're in recovery and they're struggling a little bit, or they're struggling with mental health issues, or both. And the navigator that is their job, is to case manage with somebody. My pretrial staff is really focused on accountability. and making sure they make it to court and they follow the rules that the court has set down.
Do you keep track of statistics? For example, failures to appear, like we heard from Stratford?
That is a number that I cannot give to you today, but it is something that I can try and get for you. So when I took over it 2 years ago, there were no statistics at all. The county, Merrimack County, has worked to purchase a program called North Point, where the Department of Corrections, pretrial, all the human services programs will all be on the same database. So we'll be able to garner information, and it's going to save us time. And I suspect that I'll be able to extract that type of information. What I have now is nothing more than a fancy Excel spreadsheet.
Anecdotally, are you seeing better, fewer failures to appear, fewer bench warrants in your county based on your services? If you can. If you do have no idea, that's okay too.
Do you want to speak to that? Do you know the information?
Anecdotally, yes. Overall, our rates of success are better with, when we're supervising somebody, we're having a look at who they are, figuring out what their needs are, and addressing those needs again and mitigating risk. And risk isn't, necessarily, when we say risk, it's not about, risk to public safety. It's risk of non-appearance or non-compliance with their bail conditions, which leads to other things. So, yeah, overall, I would say yes, the success is more.
With regard to mental health and substance abuse issues, do you have how do you deal with that? You refer them to certain places? Do you have a list of places with available beds to people that needs to go for rehab?
That's probably one of the hardest things that we do. In my entire career, I never would have bet you 26 years ago that I would have seen the mental health needs surpass the substance use disorders. And it has. It officially has this year when we gathered the information. We have contracted with an individual who comes in and she's embedded in our building. She has her own office, and she's in our systems to provide MLADAC services to our clients if they need it. But that's a taxpayer dollar that's paying for that, because we cannot get our clients into anywhere to get an MLADAC assessment or to get some sort of substance use assessment or a mental health assessment. So knowing that that was an issue for us, we elected to bring somebody in, and we pay for that.
Is that because those services just aren't out there? Or is it because they don't accept Medicare? What is it?
It's both. It's both. And we're seeing where a couple weeks ago we had a behavioral health group that just shuttered their doors on a Friday morning, and they could no longer afford to keep going. And that was a combination of they're not getting the funding they need from Medicare. Our clients don't have Medicare. We're trying to get them into Medicare and all those types of things. So it's really a struggle to get people the services that they need.
How long does it take you to get somebody into Medicare? Let's say they come in, they have no health insurance, but they clearly qualify for Medicare. How long does it take for you to actually get it so that they can use it to get some of these services?
So we do it and the jail does it simultaneously, and it's really not a difficult process to initiate the paperwork and to submit it, and then it's hurry up and wait. Like anything else, you're waiting for the process to turn back to you. But it can be done in a matter of days, where if the return is done quickly, it's fairly seamless.
Is the county able to bill Medicare for any of the services you provide that are related to mental health?
That is something that we are actually exploring today. We discussed what those numbers would look like. Our diversion staff is licensed. Each of them is, so we would be able to bill for their time. So it's a possible revenue point. Yes, sir.
Any questions from the committee members? Representative Stone.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you the same question. In regards to pretrial services, do you do dual supervision with the probation department and parole department?
We do. And I don't know if you saw me shaking my head and smiling when you asked the question, because it is a bone of contention between some of our staff and the fact that they're supervising somebody who's already on probation parole. But the reality is that probation parole doesn't have the capacity to do the work that we do. Our caseloads are much smaller. And so, yes, we do double dip, and they're paying the state to supervise them on probation parole, and we're paying the county employees to supervise them on bail for that violation of probation.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the defendant is paying a probation fee to the state,
True.
but you're really the ones doing the supervision because they have a pending new charge. Is that correct?
I would say that we work together pretty well. We do collaborate. I don't want to put any shade on probation parole, but we do the lion's share of the supervision, yes. And pretrial services in Merrimack County today does not require a fee. We do not make people pay, except they pay for their electronic monitoring or their alcohol monitoring. They do pay for that. County taxpayers do not pay for that, but otherwise, county taxpayers are paying for pretrial.
What is the cost of the electronic monitoring per day for your county?
It's $33 a week for us. We do it by week for electronic monitoring, and it's $30 for alcohol monitoring. So about 9% of our supervised population are on electronic monitoring. That's the highest level of supervision we hold.
And does the county own the devices, or do you lease them? How does that work, that cost of that?
We work with a group called Track Group, and they send us the equipment, and we have a contract with them, so we get so many for free, and then we pay a fee per day for them sitting on the shelf if there's not an ankle inside of them. But this system is it's a pretty standardized system. It works really, really well, and all of our staff know how to myself included, know how to put that bracelet on and deploy the bracelet, so we can do it within hours of an order from a judge. We do have a process that we go about, though, because you do need to have a place to charge that bracelet. So we work out where the person's living. You know, we have to get logistics in place.
Do you have a lot of clients who don't have a place to charge or live?
We
And
do.
what do you do with them, and how do you provide services for them if you can?
So we're lucky that we're right up the street, right on North Main Street in Concord. So we're really close to the Friendly Kitchen. We're really close to all the services, and we work very closely with the Coalition to End Homelessness and the Friendly Kitchen team to provide services together. A big piece of this social service process, human services, is that if you overlap, you're choking an already choked system. It's the same with criminal justice. If we overlap, we're putting more effort into one person than is probably fair. So we provide the services in all the same ways. I know that I can send somebody to the Market Basket parking lot and they can plug into the light pole because there's an outlet there, and they can charge their bracelet there if they have to. But some of the things that we've done is just made sure that they know they can come to us. They can get clothing, they can get some quick food if they need it. They can have a place to charge their devices in our office. It's a safe place. It also gives us an opportunity to lay eyes on the person and make sure that they're in a healthy way.
Do you see a large portion of your clients ordered by the judge to your services? How is your relationship with the judiciary? I know that we heard from the other county that they were pleased that those services were offered within their county. Do you have a similar experience?
We have a wonderful relationship with the justices in Merrimack County, both in Superior Court and in district courts. The largest struggle we have is that they don't have enough judges sometimes. So if they have a traveling judge from a different county, they don't know that our pretrial services exist. But we often we also have 2 courts that are dual county courts. And so that becomes a struggle too, because a judge is in Belknap County, in Franklin District Court, is not used to the fact that there's a robust program in Merrimack County, because he knows there's not one in Belknap necessarily, or as just an example. But we do have a good relationship with our judges. They are happy with our services. And we, a large piece of what we do is because we've had conversations. What do you need? Your Honor, what are your needs? And we tailor our programs to that.
And is it safe to say, because your program exists, that a large portion of these people are able to continue working and contributing to society versus otherwise they would have to just sit in your county lockup?
If they weren't out with us contributing, then you would double the capacity of the Department of Corrections and the price per day would go up.
Last call for questions. Representative Stone again?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I asked the other folks from Stratford County, when you have a violation in pretrial, how long does it take you to get that individual before the judge?
We report our violations to the prosecutor's office and they can elect to send it to a judge or not.
So they have the discretion not to send it if they choose
Yes, sir.
to. Typically, what do you see in your experience if they do decide to have a court hearing?
If they do decide to have a court hearing, and they file the motion, we usually see a hearing within 10 days.
Thank you.
Representative Pratt?
How early do you get involved with the individuals? I mean, from the time of the bail bond, the bail commission sees them, what time do you get involved?
We get involved when the court assigns them to us.
At the court
It's
time,
court
that's what I
ordered. The
thought.
bail commissioners in Merrimack County, while they are familiar with pretrial and diversion, they do not
Use that.
use that. And I think it's probably because they don't feel like they can. And that's just me saying it.
Okay.
I don't have the data to support that
Have you
comment.
reached out to any of them to try and have a lunch and learn that your service is available to them?
No, sir, we haven't. We've been to the brown bags that are offered by the courts, but that is certainly something that I already wrote down that Carrie said that she's done that, and I think it's a solid idea, and I think that that's something that we could certainly do.
Thank you. See
Thank
no further questions. Thank you guys so much for coming in today and providing with this information. If there's anything else you'd like to share, feel free to give it, send it on to the committee. What? Representative Gathright.
I know. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to know, is it specific to like first-time offenders or anyone?
Pretrial services is any offender.
Okay.
Diversion, we have some groupings that are first-time offenders, but the reality is that we're gonna accept a client. We are all about second chances.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
And that will conclude our hearings for today. I'd like to thank everyone who came today to testify and share this information with us. Once more, we have a lot to think about. We will be back again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to be hearing hopefully from Cheshire and a few other folks. Tomorrow shouldn't go quite as long, I don't think. And the next week, I think, is going to be the last week of hearing from anybody, and then we're going to sit down and write this thing. So, thank you all, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Big ass, like.